Awesome. Thank you so much, Doji. Hi guys, I'm Tori, and yeah, I'm a UX designer currently at Clever, and I wanted to give this talk on user research. Really, user research that doesn't suck is just a catchy title that I wanted to spread the word and try and get you guys out so we can talk more about user research and a couple of user research methods that are important. All right, so a little bit about me to kind of set the stage. I am from DC. I moved here about 2 months ago, so I'm super new to OKC. I'm a current designer at Clever, like I mentioned. I also was a design instructor for General Assembly back in DC, and so that General Assembly is a tech boot camp. I also attended an immersion boot camp at General Assembly for 3 months, quit my job, changed my life, did an immersion boot camp, and am now an official designer. And that was all maybe about 4 years ago. So if you guys want to look up a little bit more about me, here's my portfolio, or if you want to contact me after the talk, I have my LinkedIn and my Twitter information up there. Okay, so diving in, and we wanted to talk about our objectives. I'm going to discuss why user research is important, like why as designers we care about information. Who here is a UX designer? Who is a graphic or UI designer? And any developers? We got a couple? Awesome. Okay, just to understand my target audience here. We also want to dive into a little bit of qualitative versus quantitative analysis. And then to keep it short and simple, I only picked 3 specific user research methods that we'll actually dive into today: contextual inquiries or field study, user interviews, and surveys. Okay, let's start off. Why do we do user research in the first place? In short, we want to understand the perspective of the user as best as we can. So why can't we just ask people what they want? This is one of my most favorite images, and it's from Henry Ford, a quote from Henry Ford, who's a man who revolutionized the automobile manufacturing industry. And it says, if I had asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So people are experts in their own problems, not in their solutions. And us as designers, we need to use that user research to understand their problem, and then we take that information and their insights and design solutions for them. Okay, so how are people dealing with the problem right now? So on the left, we have a car that apparently doesn't have any bricks or support, so they're using these little carts. On the right, there's a satellite with an umbrella over it. So user research is learning the why behind these decisions. I don't know why they did this. For example, one person could have put the umbrella over the satellite because they get a mixed signal when it rains. Another person could have a problem with the neighbor's kid who's spitting gum on their satellite. We don't know why, but they both did this and they had different reasons. So why do we do research at all? We want to reduce our risk. We want to take our information up front, validate the user's pain points, goals, what their frustrations are. We also want to keep our upfront costs low. You guys know, designers are expensive, developers are expensive, overhead's expensive. So if we do this up front, we keep those costs low. Instead of building a product that doesn't solve the user's problem, we get to learn about this in the front end with user research. Also, you are not the user. I am not the user. You guys might be one of the users, but keep that in mind as you go through your user research and your build process. I worked with a developer on a survey app, and yes, he had taken surveys before. I've taken surveys before, but my primary persona for this specific survey app were people who were hard to count. And so for this project, it was the homeless and drug addicts. So he was not my user. He was a developer with a high-paying job. So that's a whole other conversation about how to communicate these decisions to your developer or anyone else, but it's just a reminder that we're not the user. So just kind of talking about 2 types of research today, we'll start off with generative research. So the first image on the left, it's more like branching. This is best at the beginning of a project when you're looking at blue sky planning. You have no end in sight, and it's really exciting, and there's no specific direction, so you can explore all these tangents. And there's also evaluative research. This determines more of if an idea works. So if you already have a project built, then you do want to refine and validate the decisions that you've already made. If you're thinking that you need to build out a new feature, you can validate those design decisions and move on with the process as you go. All right, quantitative versus qualitative. And keeping this a little high level, a couple quantitative methods that we've used are A/B testing. You can use surveys, clickstream analysis. These are basically things that we get numbers from. And then there's qualitative data, which UX designers use a lot, such as user interviews, contextual inquiry, usability tests, focus groups. These things are hard to count and quantify, but they're valuable because we understand more of the why as opposed to the, like, how many. All right, has anyone seen this diagram from Christian Rohr before? It's like 20 popular user research methods before. Yeah, we got a couple. So I'm gonna dissect this a little bit, but this is a bunch of popular research methods put up onto a diagram. And in general for user research, we combine the insights gained from a variety of methods to understand at a deeper level our user's perspective. So breaking it down a little bit, the top, we have the behavioral section. What do people do? So for example, eye tracking, A/B testing, clickstream analysis. When we use those research methods, we get to learn what people are doing with the actual product in hand. In the middle, between behavior and attitude, we get a mix of both. Maybe they're using the product, maybe they're just talking about the product. But for example, we have the ethnographic field study or contextual analysis, which we'll talk about a little bit more in depth in a moment. And then down at the bottom, we have the attitudinal section, so what people are saying. Typically, they're not using the product at this point, but we are talking about user interviews, focus groups, card sorting, or surveys. Again, these are understanding what people are saying about their problem. And then just to dissect this in a different way, on the left, these research methods are directly observed. And on the right, we have research methods that are indirectly reported. Again, thinking of the clickstream analysis and surveys. These are what people are telling us that they're doing, but the user researcher is not in the room with them. Okay, any questions so far? Yes, the question was, will I have slides available? And yeah, I'll send out a PDF later on. Okay, so in order to keep, I didn't want to just keep this talk super high level. I wanted to dive in a little bit and give you guys some pro tips, some insights onto how to make your user research better. So let's dive into contextual inquiry a little bit and just talk about some pro tips that I've learned in my experience. So first off, I'll just start with a story. This is a picture of trash. I was working on a project in DC where we were learning about the circular economy, which think like recycling, reusing, upcycling different items. And our goal was to understand how the Washingtonians were getting rid of their items. So my team and I went to our local trash and recycling center. We sat there, watched a couple of cars go through. We took in our surroundings. So one thing I would recommend to everyone is look for the duct tape, or how are people solving their problem, if there's a problem? Is there a pain point? So one thing I noticed was that there was limited signage. They actually paid people to direct cars to the battery section, to the trash section, to the paint section. There wasn't enough property or signage for people to understand where to go. Also, one of the biggest takeaways was the smell. So in a contextual analysis or field study, think of things that you won't get from just sitting in your office. And so the smell was overwhelming, as you can understand, in a trash center. But our overall takeaway was that this was not a great experience. It wasn't fun. I didn't know where to go. People didn't understand where to put things without having a helper immediately assist them. There was trash when you got out of your car, so you're stepping on trash, and the smell was horrible. So it wasn't an inviting experience, to say the least. So diving into some information, this is a great research alternative to user interviews. User interviews can take a while. If they're one-on-ones, they take a while. A field study, you are in the field, you get to witness firsthand their behavior, your user's behavior, and see what they're actually doing and how they're solving a problem or how they're going about their business. So something you could ask is, what if you weren't in the room and you wanted to research someone in their natural environment? How would you go about that? How does this direct observation yield different insights versus user interviews? Think of the diagram we just saw from Christian Moore. We have people's behavior, what people actually do, and then we have what people say they do. They might honestly think they're doing something, but you'll witness a different action when you're in person and witnessing yourself. And then another pro tip, utilize all of your senses. What do you hear? So for this trash, we heard trash pickup. We heard people asking questions. Where do I put the batteries? Where do I recycle paint? What do you smell? These are things that you can't get from a user interview. So use that to bolster your user research and build on to the empathy that you're gaining for your users. All right, some pros of contextual inquiry. So prompts or questions are kept to a minimum. This is good. Your goal is to watch and learn. You might witness something you may never think to ask. Again, this is where I think understanding the senses comes in. You won't necessarily think about what did you hear, what do you smell, what do you see. And someone might not think to tell you those things. This represents actual behavior. So whether they're actually using the product, if maybe you're asking about a toothbrush study, you're witnessing how they use their toothbrush or when do they use their toothbrush. And then some cons. Prompts or questions are kept to a minimum. So this is a positive and a negative. Maybe you want to ask those questions, but it's your goal to be quiet. You want to watch them. You don't want them to change their behavior. Maybe they'll feel shy if they actually brush their teeth after breakfast, or if they don't brush their teeth at all, and they feel conscientious about that. It's time-consuming to organize. It's time-consuming to analyze. It's, again, qualitative data. Software access, you might be dependent on that. It might be geography dependent. If you have a client in Alaska, that might be hard to go and actually do a field study and watch them. And there's no promise of results. Okay, moving on to user interviews. So defining your research goals is a priority. Make sure you put them into the research plan and share them with your team. You want everyone to be on the same page. You want to prep a discussion guide. So if anyone's had any type of interview, whether you've been the interviewee or the interviewer, you can go on a tangent, or maybe the interviewer talks a lot. So you want to make sure that you have a discussion guide so you understand your goals as the researcher. You are the professional in the room. So if your goal is to understand someone's morning routine, don't feed them that information. You need to think of that evaluative funnel that we saw earlier on and drill them down. Ask these open-ended questions to tell a story. So instead of, do you eat fried food at your lunchtime? Ask, what type of food do you eat at lunch? Keep things open-ended. You don't want to input your own inferences into their answers. And silence is your friend. It's really awkward, but hopefully and typically, they will be forced to talk more. You want them to talk. You want to explore those tangents. You're not going to get that information from a survey or when you ask yes or no questions. You want to hear something and explore what they're telling you. And then also ask why. Okay, so you do eat fried food at lunch. Why? Tell me more about that. It's our job, again, to peel away these layers and understand why. Okay, just to dive into the psychology a little bit because I think it's fascinating. Let's talk about cognitive bias for a moment. And I'll just read this quick definition. So cognitive bias is a general term used to describe many observer effects in the human mind, some of which can lead to perceptual distortion, inaccurate judgment, or illogical interpretation. So basically, thinking of that satellite dish with the umbrella, you might have the same behavior, or you as the interviewee might have the same behavior, and you can empathize, like, yeah, I totally brush my teeth after I eat lunch. But the why might be different, so don't underestimate that. So there's a whole list. Take a look at that Wikipedia list. It's fun to explore, again, the psychology, especially if you're interested in human factor design or human-computer interaction. I'll give you two examples. So the bandwagon effect is kind of fun. So the tendency to do or believe things because many of the other people do the same things as you. And then also there's the IKEA effect. Has anyone ever bought something and built it from IKEA? A lot of nods. I definitely have, and I like to do a bunch of DIY projects, and I'm really proud. So I have this really cool side table set for my bedroom, and my boyfriend and I refinished them. They were maybe $20. We sanded them down, varnished, shellacked, all of the things, and now they're so sparkly and shiny, and I'm really proud of them. And that is the IKEA effect. Like, I'm placing more value on those little shelves because I not just put them together, but I shine them up. So that's the IKEA effect. Again, look into cognitive bias. It's so interesting, again, diving into the psychology of UX design. Okay. User interviews. So just kind of like wrapping this back up with user interviews. The positives here, you get a one-on-one discussion with someone, your actual user. And typically you'll probably do 6 to 8, 6 to 10 user interviews to get a good understanding of what your target audience is looking for. So you get that rich one-on-one discussion. You can gather that targeted information. You can explore those stories, those tangents, and really get them talking to you. And think of all of this stuff. This will help you build your persona later on down the road. I'm like, all right. And then some cons here. It's time consuming and hard to analyze. It also doesn't represent the realistic use of the product. Again, you're just listening to their attitude. You're understanding what people are saying. So I did a round of user interviews for a social media analysis tool I was working on for a client from the DoD. And it was already built, so this was a more evaluative line of questioning. In order to analyze the interviews, I went through and started highlighting the pain points from everyone I talked to. And then I kind of rounded out some categories. So time-consuming effort was one of my categories. And from there, I would go over the highlighted versions and add a slash to the categories. And then at the end, I just counted up all the slashes, and my top 3 categories with slashes were my top 3 pain points from that focus group interview. So this is what a lot of analyzation looks like from qualitative data. You have to make up your own tests, make up your own studies. But for me, that worked. And I guess the point of that is that there's plenty of just made up research goals out there. And that's how I learned how to, quantify those interviews. Okay, any questions so far? And there's time at the end. I just want to make sure if there's anything. Yes? Let me see if I understand that. Was it, did I go through any activities for cognitive bias? Ooh, that's good. So did I go through any cognitive bias activities to remove that line of thinking from interviewing? That's a great question. So you are there as the professional. Remove yourself from this. And that's a double-edged sword because at the same time you want to be inviting. You want to, hey, like, how's the weather? You want to butter them up a little bit. You want to have a nice conversation. You don't want it to be sharp and robotic. So that's a great question. It's tricky. It really is. You need to remove yourself. You're the professional in the room. You are the user researcher. You need to ask why. So sure, maybe like I also brush my teeth after lunch, like 8 hours after I woke up. But you don't want to empathize. You don't want to interject your own stories. So you, as the researcher, need to remain a little bit silent and let your interviewee talk more. You want to empathize and say, oh, I understand, or I get that, but don't feel the need to share your own stories. This isn't a coffee chit chat. You are the researcher in the room. Okay, jumping into our quantitative research method for today, our token quantitative surveys. So again, just some pro tips here. Start general. You want to grab some demographics. So their name's kind of always fun, their age range, maybe salary, maybe where they're from, education level, what their current job is. Pick a few softball questions. One, they're helpful to build out your persona later on, and two, kind of like warms them up. And then you want to get into more complex questions. So think of the funnel. So you're starting with these softball questions, and then you start drilling down to your research goals. Write good questions. It's harder than it sounds, but I promise you, if you understand your research goal, work backward from that. A couple years ago, I was working with a client who wanted to create a language learning platform. And in order to collect data, we created a survey with some basic softball questions. Again, we wanted to use that to build out our persona later on with actual data. Then we asked if people had used a language learning platform online before. And then we listed a couple of them. So great, we're collecting some quantitative data. This is fun. And then we asked if they had any frustrations with them. And we listed a couple, and then we had an open-ended question at the end if they wanted to select other. But so having those frustrations, like that was our goal, understanding the problems. So when we were creating this language learning platform for our client, we didn't fall to those problems. And also make the survey short and sweet. Of course, this is dependent on your goals, but it's hard to get people to take your survey. So I always like to say, hey, please take this 2 to 5 minute survey. You're going to help me learn how to save the planet. So set an expectation for time, and give them a reason why they should take it. All right, so surveys. I love them, and as a design instructor, I would always recommend my students to add them to their user research design strategy, which you'd have a couple of research methods, and I always would recommend adding a survey. It's quick and dirty. You can do a 1-minute survey, and you'll still collect some fun quantitative data. So blast your network, blast your email distribution list, whatever you have available to you. It's quantitative data. It's so nice to have that pretty graph. You also get some qualitative data. So again, it's harder to analyze this, but you can ask those open-ended questions and allow those interviewees to input their own information. On the flip side, don't be fooled by these numbers. There's something known as non-response bias. So you sent this email to 1,000 people on your email distribution list. 20% responded. But what about those 80%? Why didn't they want to respond? Did they not care about saving the planet? Or did they not have the time? We don't know why. So there is going to be room for error in there. So just numbers are not everything. getting people to participate can be difficult. So I don't know if anyone got the recent Creative Mornings email about the end of year survey, or on your Home Depot or Target receipt, they offer you an incentive to provide your feedback. And again, users might not be using their product. So there are different types of surveys. You can think of one as generative research, where you're just trying to understand problems, goals, pain points. Or if you've, on your iPhone, if you've gotten a pop-up, maybe you're using the product and you're getting an intercept survey. So that's when you are using the product. So it depends what type of survey. And just an example of a pretty graph. So sending this out in my survey, I got a pretty graph. It's on my portfolio. I share it with people. And I clearly have 3 top pain points for that language learning platform: pronunciation, lack of feedback, and cost. That's exciting, it's fun, and again, it's pretty. So kind of bringing this to a close a little bit, user research that doesn't suck. As designers, it's our goal to design a product to solve our users' problem and help them solve their goals. On the surface, it really is that simple. Thinking back to Christian Rohr's diagram, in design thinking, we utilize a variety of research methods that we have at our disposal in order to peel away those layers, to understand the why, understand where the duct tape is, how are they currently solving their problem right now, and what are you going to do to fix it? So I think the point of my talk here is really to embrace user research. You can't use just one research method. It's not enough. It doesn't dissect this graph well enough to show you the full picture. If you just used an email survey, okay, you'd understand that cost was prohibitive in a language learning platform. But why? We don't know anything else. If you just do a user interview, you just understand the user's attitude. You don't know, again, how they actually interact with the platform or product. This doesn't just go to UX design or digital design. This goes to industrial and service design as well. And then the third one we talked about, ethnographic field studies, I also call contextual inquiry. So these 3, and I wanted to show that on this recap diagram, that we used a qualitative method that's attitudinal, a qualitative method that's behavioral, and we reviewed a quantitative method that's attitudinal as well. So we're already dissecting, and even just thinking about using those 3, or come to a deeper understanding of what we'll be designing, or come to a deeper decision about what the user's perspective is, like what their problem is. Or again, I use problem and goals interchangeably because we might not just be solving a problem. Like Facebook, I don't know if they were solving a problem, but they had a goal that they were trying to solve, and they created something new out of that.
How many methods would you recommend doing per project when you're choosing what to do?
So the question is, how many methods would you use when you're creating a new product? And there's no one answer to that. I don't have one answer. Every project I use, I'm going to use a variety. So the short answer is use several, probably 2, probably 3. I use a lot of competitive analysis as a type of research method for me. I want to see what's already out there, how they're solving it. Absolutely talking to users, and sometimes that's usability testing. You might not get access, so it is going to depend on your constraints. Do you have access to subject matter expert? Which maybe in my experience, and especially at Clever, I have more access to the subject matter experts than being able to send out a survey to their email distribution list. So it will change, and what I've told my students, use a variety. You do want to look something like this, use from different areas, and it continues. So at the start of a project, you want to use a couple of different methods. For example, these 3, you want to talk to the user, you want to get a background. Again, surveys are quick and dirty, so I love surveys. But getting in the field is harder, that you might not have an opportunity to get to do a field study. Okay, so the question is, what made me pick these 3 specific research methods? So I really wanted to talk about something that I could speak to, that I had examples to share with you guys. I feel like I've learned best when I have speakers who give examples and stories. I like stories. I think they can just help us digest the information more easily. So I wanted to pick 3 that I've had experience with, that I could tell stories about, and that also were dissected on this map. I wouldn't just go and talk to you guys about focus groups and interviews and card sorting. Those are all the same. And part of my talk today is I want to understand where you guys are coming from in terms of user research, and I didn't want this to be too high level. I wanted it to be impactful. I wanted to give you guys something to take away, some pro tips to move forward with, some stories that you can reflect on and move forward for your next project. Maybe you guys are all going to go survey a bunch of people today, and that will be awesome. I will fill it out. If it's under 5 minutes, I will fill it out. Yeah. So I'm kind of wrapping up, so please, I'm open to any questions. Yes. Yes.
How do you handle remote situations where, for example, you brought up having, a client that has users in Alaska, and it's not fun, realistic for you to fly to Alaska and interview people. So what do you do to facilitate that kind of situation?
So, for example, if we have clients or a need to go to Alaska or some far place heck, if I needed to go to Tulsa and I can't go, how do I solve those problems? And thank goodness we have technology. So there are a variety of tools to use. Using like Google Hangouts or Zoom, I can share a screen. So I haven't had to do this specifically, but you can do usability testing virtually. And you, again, are asking the user to talk through where they're clicking, talk through why they're clicking through the prototype that you sent them as an example. And then you can also record that and go back. And so you're listening to the audio, you're listening to why, and you're actually seeing them use that product. And that's an example of how you would do that for usability testing. Surveys would be great because you could just send that out. User interviews, you can do that again over video prompts. And again, record that so you have that information to go back and review, or if your team needs to review something, or if you want to catch that juicy quote for your persona, go back and review that. So technology is a big help in your network. Doji?
What would be a reason that you would use one usability research method over another? What do you gain from one over another specifically?
So what do you gain from one user research method over another? That's a tough question. My initial reaction is thinking what would be the most impactful? And for me, getting the product in front of a user, if I had to pick one, I would do usability testing, guerrilla usability testing with people in my office. Maybe they're not the user, maybe they are the user, but getting a product in front of somebody. Another one might be a survey. If I have limited options, I could get just the most information in the smallest amount of time, and because I could add closed and open-ended questions. That's tough. Cool. Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you guys for coming. Thank you for Techlahoma for sponsoring us, and Doji and Bianca, my co-organizers. And yay. So I have some resources. I have a ton more if you guys are really interested. And then also just wanted to mention our next talk is on January 30th. We have Cara Bell coming in to speak, same time, same place, here at Starspace at 11:30 next month. Yay. Okay, thank you guys.